In older babies and toddlers, night waking is influenced by three key factors. These are how they settle to sleep, the daily rhythm, and what I call motivating factors, or things that happen during the night that motivate your baby or toddler to wake. If one of these three factors isn't addressed, it's likely night waking will continue to be a persistent problem. Success comes when all three factors have been addressed. This week's episode is dedicated to helping you and your little one enjoy restful nights. Plus, we have an exciting announcement to make about a new feature coming soon to our Sombelle Sleep Clinic programs. Welcome back to Brand New Little People, the podcast companion to the Sombelle Pediatric Sleep Clinic programs created by us. I'm Dr. Fallon Cook, and I'm here with Dr. Laura Conway, and we're the directors of Infant Sleep Australia. Laura, how hard are those night wakings in those first few months? How did you cope with your little ones?
Look, it feels like it was a baptism of fire. I didn't know what I was in for. And then I was in it, and just somehow each night just bled into the next night, into the next, until those first weeks and months were behind me. What about you?
It's such a shock to the system, isn't it? Wow, nothing, you can't prepare yourself for it ahead of time. No. There's just no way you can be prepared for it. No. And yeah, it can be so brutal. One of mine was born premature, so the night wakes really went on for a long time before they started to reduce. And I just think it is really amazing what we can manage. Not that you can ever really adjust to having broken sleep, but it's quite shocking, I think, for a lot of parents when they realize, oh my gosh, I've had these really broken nights and somehow I still keep getting up and I still keep going through the paces and I keep surviving. And well done to any parent out there who's thinking, how do I manage this every day? You're doing such a good job. It's really hard when you're sleep deprived and nights are tricky.
Yeah, and this will be often the first time for any human that they are having to wake up frequently overnight for something that cannot be ignored. It's not like before you have children where the noisy neighbours or noisy traffic might wake you and you can roll over and go back to sleep. This is needing to wake up and attend to a small vulnerable human to feed and change the nappy. And it goes on and on and on. And when they're really little, of course, they have those tiny tummies. They need to feed often. They're having explosive poos. They need to have those nappies changed. And there's those needs simply have to be met overnight. But today we're actually going to be talking about older babies and toddlers, aren't we, Fallon, rather than those very little ones, when we can start to expect the number of wakes overnight to drop to a smaller number than when they were newborn.
Absolutely. So I think for today's podcast episode, we're probably focusing really on babies 6 months and over, and toddlers as well. All of this will be relevant to toddlers too. And I think as well, we're not going to define frequent night waking here because it means something different to everybody. But if you're finding night waking feels problematic and you think, I'm sure my baby could have fewer night wakes than what we're currently experiencing, then all of this content will be really relevant to you. But let's unpack. So there's really three key factors that influence night waking frequency. Let's start with the motivating factors. This one I find really interesting because I think there's so much variability that we see from child to child and what this could be. So a motivating factor could just be feeds. It could be feeds they don't really need anymore, but they just kind of like, and they just think, well, I may as well wake up. If I wake up, there's a lovely feed on offer and it's just really, really nice. So sometimes it is just feeding. But we do see some kind of weird and wonderful things in the toddlers, don't we, with parents who are just desperately trying to cope with night wakes. Sometimes we start to introduce things to help our child get back to sleep quickly, but then it kind of backfires because then they're like, right, if this is what's on offer, I'm going to keep on waking.
Particularly for toddlers who have split nights. So, they're awake for more than 30 minutes in the night. When parents are so desperate, they may offer their toddler a screen to watch. For example, here we go, I'll put some episodes of your favorite show on just so that I can close my eyes whilst you sit next to me and watch something that you really like.
No judgment from me.
No.
None whatsoever. If you've had to do that, this is a judgment-free zone. We've all
Absolutely.
been to desperate places.
Yeah, but of course that toddler is going to quite enjoy that time. And that can really motivate them to wake up in the night, normally in the second half of the night when their deep sleep is over, to be thinking, oh, I'd quite like to watch an episode of Bluey or whatever it is they want to watch. And then they might call out because they think, oh, good, I can get to do that. So that would be a motivating factor that we quite commonly see in toddlers. Sometimes we also see toddlers will be getting a snack in the middle of the night that they quite enjoy, having some one-on-one time with mum or dad.
If I say I'm hungry, then I'll get a banana or maybe a sandwich. Yeah, that's a surprising one. There's a lot of toddlers having a 3 a.m. snack. Because if they say they're hungry, then what do you know? Some food appears.
Yeah, and it's often it's really hard for us as parents to feel like we don't want to feel like we're denying our children nutrition, and particularly if you have a toddler that doesn't take on a great deal of food during the day. You might be thinking, oh, good, well, this is one time that I can get some food into them. I don't care if it's 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. Let's give them a sandwich. And then we end up sometimes in these situations where our toddlers just keep waking up for that at that time overnight because it's really motivating for them.
Yeah, and long past when they might have needed it, if they were actually hungry because they were very unwell or they had a calorie intake problem. Yeah, that's it. I think bed sharing is a really common one as well. Often parents will say, they refuse to go back in their cot from 4 a.m. seems to be a popular one.
Yes.
And so they just keep waking up because they know they get to bed share and it's really lovely. And at some point, if it's a problem for you, which it might not even be, but if it is a problem for you at some point, it just comes down to going, okay, from now on, we're going to do that walk back to bed each time. So they realize that actually that's not on the cards anymore. So what I would say is as we go through each of these 3 factors, to anyone listening in who's worried about night waking, have a think about whether there are any motivating factors that you think are influencing your child's overnight wakes. Some of them, like if it is night feeds, you might think, well, night feeds are probably part of the equation, but I'm not ready to drop them yet. And that's perfectly fine too. I just think it's great to have an understanding of some of the things that might be behind the night waking. And certainly if you've got a child who's in their toddler years and they're having night feeds, I would say it's a really common one. And often it makes a big difference when we do gradually reduce and eventually stop those overnight feeds for the toddlers. But just know that being aware of these factors doesn't mean you've got to go and change them all. You're in the driver's seat. You're the parent. You can make a call on what works for you and what doesn't.
Yeah, because what we know is that once we take away some of these motivating factors from toddlers in particular and preschoolers, they can have very strong opinions about it at 2 a.m.
Oh, they will.
Yeah, so you'll really have to pick your moment that you are going to change something if you decide that you do want to do it, and then stick with it.
Yeah, 100%. You don't want to be backtracking.
No.
Once you make a change, just make the change and weather the storm and then you'll be through it. Yeah. All right. So factor number 2 to think about is, and I reckon half of our listeners are going, oh, I know what she's going to say. She never shuts up about this. But it's the daily rhythm. Surprise, surprise.
Yes, it's so important.
Yeah, it is so important. Thinking about that kind of sleep budget for anyone who might be new to listening in, your baby or your toddler has an amount of sleep that they uniquely need. And if they get too much sleep in the daytime, they just don't think of it like a budget. They just don't have enough sleep left to do overnight sometimes. And so often babies and toddlers wake a lot overnight because they're given more opportunity to sleep than they need. So let's just imagine they've got maybe a 14-hour sleep need and they have 3 hours of day sleep. They might need 11 hours of sleep overnight. But if we always offer them 12 hours of sleep overnight, often the circadian rhythm kind of picks up on, there's some wiggle room here. I don't have to sleep 12 hours or 11 hours. Rather, no, 12 hours.
12 hours, yeah.
I'm confusing myself. The circadian rhythm's thinking, I don't need to sleep 12 beautiful hours in a row. I can wake up for an hour in the middle of the night, or maybe I'll just do lots of little 5-minute wake ups, split across the night. So definitely be thinking about that daily rhythm, because I would say that is the number one thing that the majority of parents with persistent overnight wake problems really report to us is that they've tried all the things, but they haven't actually nailed that daily rhythm. They haven't really mastered sleep pressure. Sometimes parents think they're doing a close enough job, but when we look at the diary, we're like, no, actually there's some room for changes within here. So I think it's just crucial. And I think you see that a lot in your clients in the clinic too, Laura.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that idea of there being a daily budget is really helpful for parents. So if your budget is 12 hours or 13 hours a day, and your child is having a 3-hour nap, then you can't be expecting them to do 12 hours overnight as well without something falling over. So we can see that they wake frequently or do extended overnight wakes, or they start the day early. Of course, we're not talking about early rising in this episode. We're talking about those wakes during the night. And it's really understandable. They simply are not able to build their sleep pressure up to a high enough point at the start of the night to be able to maintain their sleep in a lovely, long, restorative stretch during the night. They're up, down, or they do their split night. And in that time where they're awake for however long in the middle of the night, they're waiting for the sleep pressure to get high enough again so that they can do their next stretch of sleep. So it's really worth looking at that daily rhythm and determining what that daily nap budget is going to be and how much that leaves overnight, and therefore what would be an appropriate bedtime and wake up time that fits that nicely for your little one.
Yeah, it's so crucial because we see so many families where they've been following, maybe it's a really rigid age-based schedule, and so often they aim for huge amounts of sleep that most babies of that age can't even do anyway. But often they're really insistent on naps have to be very long, and we're aiming for this huge amount of sleep. And these poor parents have often worked so hard on self-settling skills and just find it doesn't stick. It just doesn't stick. Like they might have even gone to a sleep school for a few nights and mastered self-settling, but they get home and their baby just won't do it. And so often it's because that daily rhythm hasn't been catered to that specific child's needs. And so they initially they might manage to do it a few days, and then they have this huge crash in sleep pressure because they've overdone the sleep for a few days, and then they just they compensate by being awake a lot.
Yes.
So it's so important. Like it
is
a crucial factor. And in fact, a lot of parents will say, once I got the daily rhythm right, I didn't have to worry so much about the other factors because they were tired enough to do pretty well overnight. And it was, not entirely problem solved, but it got us a long way towards our goal.
Yeah. And I think it's so often the case that parents who say, oh, cot settling didn't work, that wasn't the cause of my child's waking overnight, are the families where the individual sleep needs haven't been catered for. And so working on cot settling is only going to get you part of the way if that is an issue. Because if you teach your child or support your child or toddler to be able to go to sleep without lots of hands-on support from you, if they're in their bed for 12 hours over the night and they only need 10 hours, they've got 2 hours where they're just simply going to be doing something other than sleeping. And it doesn't matter how well you stuck to the plan from the early parenting center or from your nurse or from from wherever you got it from. It just will not stick until you refine the daily rhythm. So that's why we really often bang on about it, is because it's so often the missing piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, and I'm glad there's a lot more awareness of this now. It's something that really should change for parents, because I feel like it's so unfair that so many parents try and try and try again. They're working so hard. They're trying to fix these problems. It's exhausting. It is so tiring. Yeah. Some families we see, they find us when their child is a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, and they have been in this battle for 3 or 4 years, and this one thing would have changed everything. They could have had great sleep since their baby was maybe 4 or 5 months old, but they just didn't get the right advice. It's that important. All right. And then factor number 3 will be no surprise to any of our listeners either. It's the settling and the sleep associations and how they fall asleep. So, of course, it's a key driver of night waking. If your baby falls asleep, maybe you're rocking them in your arms, or your toddler that, they're rocking in your arms, and you put them down when they're asleep, it is absolutely natural human behavior to do a systems check during the night, the end of each sleep cycle. Our brains are kind of like, has anything changed? Is there anything, any reason I need to wake up? And if they've been transferred to their cot when they're asleep, they are going to spring awake reasonably frequently overnight. Some babies are very sensitive to this and will wake every sleep cycle. Others can make it through a few sleep cycles before it really starts to bother them. But it's, when we look at the scientific literature where they've asked parents to track their baby's sleep, and we've got data from thousands of babies, how they fall asleep is just consistently one of the key drivers of night waking behavior. So definitely be having a think about that. I think this is one that parents really are quite aware of mostly already. But just have a think, what is it that you're doing when your baby or toddler falls asleep? And during the night, are you still there doing it in the middle of the night? Probably not. You've probably gone to bed. That could be part of it. And sometimes for toddlers, it's just they fall asleep with a parent nearby in the room, and they wake in the night like, where did you go? Get back in that chair right now.
So another one I had recently in the clinic, Fallon, was that the toddler was falling asleep whilst mum and dad were in the living room, which was just outside the bedroom door, with the TV on. And so the child was going to sleep with the TV playing, and then was waking up when the TV got turned off later. And so it's not necessarily that what you might not be doing anything hands-on, but there's something in the environment, some sound or some light, that then changes when you yourself go to bed. And so with that family, what they worked on doing was just over a few nights just turning the volume down of the TV. So they weren't listening to it with such high volume, and actually then turning it off. And there was other things going on, of course, because I tend to see more complex cases in the clinic. But, they found that led to real improvements, because their toddler then started to be able to fall asleep without that sound of the TV on, and then was able to maintain their sleep overnight. So think a little bit more broadly than just whether you were rocking them to sleep or patting them to sleep. Is there anything else in their environment that has actually become an association that you haven't realised might be the case?
What a great tip. Yeah, that's a really good tip, because it really can be all sorts of things, can't it? And we know as adults what it's like if you fall asleep, with everything just how you like it, and you wake up in the night and something has changed. Like, I've got older kids, so I know if one of them gets up to use the bathroom and leaves the hallway light on, I'll wake up because I'm like, hang on, what? I didn't leave that light on. And they're really minor things, but for your baby, it can be quite a shock to go, well, hang on, I was in my parents' arms, somehow I'm in my cot, and they can be really unsettled by that. So, you're going to hear a lot of stuff out there about how babies should be held to sleep, fed to sleep, all these sorts of things, as if they really, really need it. But actually, if it's really distressing to your child to wake up and find that they've been put in their cot, well, the kind of thing to do is actually to help them build their confidence, to feel okay to fall asleep in their cot, so they're not constantly waking up with a shock overnight, over and over again. So they're sort of the three core things that we, even in the clinic, with any client that we see, we're thinking about these three factors. And there's lots of information about these factors within the Sombelle programs, and all the different considerations you need to make when sort of assessing these different factors. There's lots of strategies and things that you can use once you identify what some of those factors might be that are influencing your baby or your toddler's sleep. But what I would say is always be thinking about, is it the right time? So what I really don't want is for a parent who's quite happy with their child's overnight waking. It's not a problem. I don't want them to hear this episode and think, oh gosh, they're saying I've got to go and change this and I'm doing it wrong. You're not doing anything wrong. As we always say, you shouldn't feel any pressure from anyone about how you're settling your baby or your toddler, or what you're doing in the middle of the night. If it's working fine for you, then you don't need to change anything at all. Hopefully this information is just helpful, because often parents feel okay about things, but over time that starts to change. It might be that the night waking eventually does start to feel more of a problem for you, and you'll just have this knowledge and be able to think about some of the things that you might be able to change to reduce that night waking when you feel ready.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that some children are, just like some adults, are kind of more resilient sleepers than others. And we've got, I see babies in the clinic, or rather, I'm often seeing their siblings, but other their younger brothers or older brothers or sisters might have happily laid in their cot in the morning, just watching their hands or playing with their dummy for half an hour or an hour before it was wake up time. And so it was never an issue for anyone. But baby number 2 or 3 comes along, and actually it's just completely different kettle of fish. And as soon as they're awake, they cannot stand being alone in their cot, and then just like, come and get me. So it can vary within a family as well, what you're experiencing within a family. So think about what's going to be right for you and your child, and decide whether it is now the right time to do it. If it is, then read through the appropriate modules in Sombelle and decide how you might address those, which factor it is that's causing wakes overnight, whether you need to look at those motivating factors, whether you need to look at the daily rhythm, or whether you need to change how they go to sleep, and then work up your plan. Pick a day that you're going to start, have all your ducks in a row, and then jump in and get things sorted when you're ready.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that leads me really nicely into our big announcement that I'm so excited to make. We have been working on something pretty cool, and I'm really excited to tell our Sombelle members about this. So in the next couple of weeks, drum roll. In the next couple of weeks, we are releasing a night waking masterclass, and it will be free for all existing members. So it's not something we're going to be asking you to pay for. But I've currently written these masterclasses, and I've got to still sit down and record them and actually upload them into Sombelle. But the reason why I wanted to do these video masterclasses is to sort of recognize that Sombelle is a wonderful resource with all this detailed information, but a lot of people process information differently, and hearing it spoken or watching someone talk through it and show diagrams is really helpful, and you might learn better that way. So I thought this would be a really lovely way to still be using the Sombelle content, but really expanding on it in a bit more of a chatty way. So I can really walk you guys through, for the different age groups, what is it we're thinking about in terms of night waking, what's causing it, how we might go about treating it. So I'm really excited to sit down and record those, and I'm hoping that they will be up and available in the next couple of weeks. You'll see that a new chapter will appear in your Sombelle program. It would be called masterclasses, because our aim is that we will be eventually adding more masterclasses to the mix, because we are really just wanting to make Sombelle the absolute best we can possibly make it. So this is something we really want to do and kind of test out how that goes, and we'll be keen to hear feedback from parents on if they like that format. And then over time, we'll hopefully build up a bit of a library so that you can just sort of sit down and let me walk you through it all, I guess. So you don't need to do anything. I'll let you know when it's available. So I'll probably send out an email to all the members once it is up there and live and good to go. The other exciting thing we're trialing is we are going to have the option of a comments field underneath the masterclass. So if you watch it and you've got a question, you can pop it in the comments, or if you've got some feedback, you can pop it in there as well. It's a feature we're just going to trial and see how it goes, see if it's helpful to parents, to have that kind of format to ask questions and get feedback. So it's something that all current members will get, and obviously new members joining as well. And when I sort of discussed this with a few parents, they were keen to know, like, why is this being, like, why for free? Like, why is it for free? Why aren't you selling tickets to it or something? And look, at some point we might have ticketed masterclasses or webinars, things like that we do. But we always intended that Sombelle wouldn't just sit there and be static, because the science around sleep changes all the time. We always want to be keeping on adding more value and really maximizing the content so that it's as helpful as possible to as many families as possible. So we're hoping that having a bit of a video format to the masterclass, really helps make it a bit more accessible to some families. So yeah, for now, this one is a freebie, and I'm really excited to get it up there. So yay.
Yeah, it's so exciting. And yeah, we'd love to hear your feedback once it's up and live. Let us know what you think. And of course, you can send in emails with suggestions for future masterclasses you might enjoy as well. We can't promise we'll do them really, really quickly, but we will do our best. That they take a lot of work, but we are really keen. Yeah, we're really keen to keep value adding to Sombelle and supporting new parents to support their little one's sleep and sleep health.
Yeah, and this is probably a good time to mention too that if you've been thinking about joining Sombelle and you're not sure, we are in our last few days of our end of financial year sale. So it's currently 30% off memberships, but that is ending forever and it won't be offered again. So if you're keen, definitely move quickly because that will end in a few days from when we publish this podcast episode. Awesome. Yeah. Well, let's dive into some parent questions. We've got tons today. So we're going to be rapid fire. Bang, bang, bang.
Shall I kick off?
The first one?
Yeah. Yep. So Laura has written in with a question about her 8-month-old baby. She says that before starting the program, she was accidentally doing stage 2 of the slow fade approach, and they were sometimes able to settle their baby in the cot. But only Laura could do it and not her partner. She says that they've gone back to the start of the slow fade approach to build proper sleep associations and get their partner involved. But Laura says it feels like they've taken a step backwards. They've been picking their baby up more often overnight to strengthen their sleep associations, but are wondering if that's making their baby clingier and undoing the progress they'd already made. Her main question is, should she persist with the slow fade from the beginning to get their partner involved, or switch to another method they can do by themselves? And she has a second smaller question, which is that they've noticed that patting or shushing during the transfer sometimes wakes the baby up. What tips do we have, Fallon?
Yeah, I would say you always want to build on what you're already doing. So rather than taking a step backwards, I would just go, well, you know what we're doing at the moment is pretty close to step 2 of that particular approach. So let's just stick to step 2 of that approach. Because if you do go in and add more support, well, then you only got to wean them off that again. So I would tend to just say, if step 2 is roughly what they've been doing, just stick to that for every settle. And then you don't have that problem of the patting or shushing during the transfer, sometimes waking the baby up, because you'd be doing patting and shushing in the cot at that point. And you can still get your partner involved. You can take turns. And when your baby sort of picks up that, it doesn't matter if it's mum or dad or granny or a nanny or whoever it is, they just do the same thing. That's what really helps them to go, well, it's probably not a lot of point in getting all furious for poor old dad. Because he's just doing exactly what mum does or what that other caregiver does. So it's fine to just start sharing that and start from step 2 is what I would suggest.
Yeah, definitely. And then if you find that on step 2 of one of the slower approaches, things are going really well, you can always switch to one of the quicker approaches. Some parents are really surprised at how quickly their baby adapts. And then they go, do you know what? I think we've all now gained a little bit of confidence with cot settling. Let's switch to, they might switch to quick fade or even supported accelerated. Don't feel that you need to just stay with that one approach. If things are going well, you can speed up if you would like. So good luck. Let us know how you get on.
Yeah, brilliant. And Fiona has a 14-month-old who sleeps well at home with blackout blinds, but can also nap in the pram without them. She's considering weaning off the blackout blinds in the future, but isn't sure when or how to do it. She asks, what's the best age and approach to transition away from the blackout blinds? Is around 2 to 3 years of age a good time?
Well, I think, Fiona, that there isn't actually any particular age where it's a good idea to wean them out, wean your child off the blackout blinds. We know that some children just always prefer to sleep in a very dark environment, and so their parents will continue to have blackout blinds in their bedroom until they start primary school even. I'm from the Northern Hemisphere, and often we'd be putting children to bed at 7 or 8 at night, and in an English summer, it's still really very bright. So we'd have the blackout blinds for a long time, simply because even for adults, it's easier to fall asleep with darkness. And we know that's when melatonin is released. So I don't feel that there's a hurry to get rid of the blackout blinds. If there's a particular reason, if you just have temporary ones on the window, perhaps, Fiona, that you just think are unsightly and you want to stop using, you could be looking in the toddlerly years to maybe just peel off the blackout blinds a little bit, and just for a week or so, increase the amount of light in your child's room as they're going off to sleep, and then slowly, like that, get rid of those blackout blinds altogether. But I just don't think that there's any particular hurry, and if you carry on needing to use them for many years to come, there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't sound like your child has a problem sleeping in the light or in the dark. So either the slow wean, like I just described, or just hold on to them.
I think that's really good advice. Completely support that idea.
Okay, so we have a question from Belinda, who has a 3.5-month-old, and she says he usually pulls a first stretch of 6 to 9 hours of sleep at night, and then sleeps in 2 or 3 hour bursts after that. However, he only catnaps in the day. So Belinda says she's never worked out his sleep needs properly because it hasn't been a problem. But recently, she says that she believes his sleep awareness has changed, which I guess he's heading towards a 4-month mark, so that would make sense. And he's stopped linking sleep cycles. He needs his dummy replaced and a little pat every hour, and is wanting feeding every 2 to 3 hours overnight. He's also quite refluxy, so feeding him lots overnight creates cycles of trapped air, spit-ups and pain, Belinda says. And she asks, what are our thoughts to support better nighttime sleep?
My first priority would be to reduce the night feeds a bit, since Belinda describes that it is a problem because he's quite refluxy. I would aim to just offer 2 feeds overnight. And it might even be that very quickly you can get him down to just 1 overnight feed. Which I think, given what you described, Linda, it might be a priority to do that, because it's also going to help lead to better sleep if he's not sort of constantly spitting up and having trapped air and things like that. And I would work on that daily rhythm. So no, there's not a single case I would see in clinic where I wouldn't look at the daily rhythm and probably make a few tweaks here or there. I would measure his unique sleep needs and come up with a daily rhythm, because if every hour you've got to do some pats, it's a lot of night waking. I think there is probably a sleep pressure component to that waking. It's not a problem that he's only catnapping in the day. That's really normal for a 3.5-month-old. But we want to make sure he's not taking, 6 or 7 cat naps and then just has built up no sleep pressure for the overnights. Dummies always have to be replaced until around about 7 months of age. So you could also just have a think, are you happy to keep replacing the dummy for him, or is it time to let that go? Would you add anything to that, Laura?
Yeah, I know that often for babies that are refluxy, a dummy can be really helpful. So if you decide to keep the dummy, Belinda, then be thinking about doing the dummy play during the day. He's so little, of course, he's not going to be able to learn to replace it for a long time yet. But you can start to lay some foundations, helping put the dummy in his little hand and moving his hand with the dummy towards his mouth, rather than just popping it in directly. But know that you have got quite a few months ahead where you will have to replace that dummy. Yeah, and I think otherwise what you said is not that wasn't right what you said. But, I'll just correct you there, Fallon.
That's all right. I won't take it personally.
I mean, that's the only extra thing that I would add. And otherwise, yeah, good luck, Belinda. Let us know how you get on.
Yeah. All right, Ursula wrote in and she asked, how do I push past the fact my 8-month-old requires to hold my hand when she falls asleep? She says, I have tried to replace my hand with a comforter, but she has no interest. She also has a dummy which she knows to replace when she is awake, but when it falls out at night, she gets so worked up that she doesn't look to replace it. Consequently, she does not connect sleep cycles easily, has false starts no matter what I do. She sleeps 13 and a half hours and her day naps total 2 to 2.5 hours. Her last nap finishes around 3 p.m. with bedtime around 7 to 7:30. What do you reckon, Laura?
I would be looking at just tightening up the daily rhythm a little bit, Ursula, just because there's kind of an hour difference there in whether she's having 2 to 2.5 hours daytime sleep, or whether whether bedtime is 7 or 7:30. And I think that will probably go some way to explaining those false starts. So if she had 2.5 hours nap and then went to bed at 7 rather than 7:30, a few times a week, that's likely to lead to some false starts. So I would decide on one or the other for both of those things. So perhaps it's 2 hours worth of daytime sleep, and bedtime is the earlier one, or the other way around. Then I would be thinking, it's really hard, Ursula, when you do have a baby that likes to hold your hand as they fall asleep, because when they're holding your hand, they're doing something quite active with the muscles in their fingers are wrapped around your hand. And you've tried your best to replace your hand with a comforter, which is a really smart move. You might find with higher sleep pressure, you could try that again. And maybe this time round, your baby may tolerate it a little bit better. But otherwise, I'd be thinking about choosing one of the cot settling approaches that doesn't involve you holding her hand. Maybe it's patting her all the way off to sleep, or one of the quicker ones where you give her a few pats and then pause for short intervals before going back to her, and knowing that within a short space of time she's going to adapt and adjust to getting used to not holding your hand as she falls asleep. She won't like it initially, and for the first night or two it might be a bit tricky for her to go to sleep, because it's like how if we go to sleep with a different pillow or a different doona or in a different bed, it feels a bit uncomfortable initially, and we're like, oh, this isn't what I'm used to, but we do eventually get used to it. And it would be the same for your little one. So, I would be having a read through the chapters on the different cot settling approaches and picking one, and saying, okay, from this night onwards, that's the way that I'm going to settle her to sleep, instead of holding her hand. Would you have anything to add?
Yeah. Only that I'd be thinking about the wake up time as well. I find it really interesting. Lots of parents tell us all the details except the wake up time. And I totally get it. But if you've got a great daily rhythm, but after a tricky night, your baby or toddler sleeps in to make up for that tricky night, you've lost it all. You've lost all that pressure you were trying to build. So pick that wake up time, and no matter how tricky the night is, get them up, give them a big dose of bright light, start their day. And then you're telling the circadian rhythm, you can't be waking all night. You can't be up and down or having a long night wake or whatever, because you've got to get up on time, and you can't overdo the day sleep, and you've got to get through to bedtime. So when you work out that daily rhythm, Ursula, just be thinking about having that set wake up time and really trying to push through on it. Because Ursula did mention that, it sort of doesn't, she says false starts no matter what I do. And when I hear that, I think just make sure you've done the exact same thing, the same daily rhythm for a full week. Yeah. And I say this heaps in the coaching calls. It's any one night is influenced by the whole week of sleep prior. So often parents just kind of go, whoa, like mind blowing, really? And it's true. So if you've tried for a couple of days, maybe even 3 days, and then went, oh, that didn't help, you haven't tried long enough. So try doing it for a full week. I know that sucks a bit sometimes, but often it's after a week that it clicks and they fall into that pattern, and then we're off and away. It's very easy to look at one day and go, well, that night was terrible, so I won't do what I did that day. But it just doesn't quite work like that. So once you apply that new daily rhythm, give it a week, you'll see a build up in sleep pressure, and then you should have an easier time making progress with the independent settling.
Awesome. Okay, we have a question from Sarah, who has a 12-month-old who has a solid rhythm of 2 1 hour, 40-minute naps and about 10 hours overnight sleep. 2 days a week, her toddler attends daycare where she only sleeps for 45 minutes at a time. She has 2 45-minute naps. And although bedtime and wake up time stay consistent, she seems exhausted. So Sarah asks, would you recommend changing her whole daily routine every day to the 2 short naps and extending the overnight sleep? Which she says she's tried this on daycare days, but it doesn't seem to result in longer overnight sleep. Or do we recommend just changing bedtime for the 2 days that she's at daycare and keeping the old routine for the other days?
So it's the sort of situation where some children will cope with that variability and some absolutely will not. So if with that variability at the moment, things are kind of okay, your child's coping okay with it, then you don't have to change anything. But if you're finding that, it's just, I often describe it as wobbliness. Like there's this real wobbliness. There's some nights where there's more wakes. There's sometimes really tricky settling. That's when I would just change it to match what happens at daycare. Or you could even go halfway. At home, you could say, okay, 1 hour and 40-minute nap, and then the other one's going to be just the one sleep cycle, and see if that's a bit closer and manages to keep things going along okay. So it might just take a bit of experimenting, but keep in mind, like I was just saying, full week on whatever it is you decide to do it for a week. Maybe track it in a diary so you can get a sense of what happened during that week. If it didn't go well, try it the other way. Really, you're putting on your scientist hat and you're gathering data, which I love. But I think that's a great way to do things as a parent, is to try something out consistently, look at what the results are, analyze your results section, and then write up your report.
Yeah, what's your conclusion?
Your changes accordingly.
Yeah. What's the future
publish
action?
It in a scientific journal.
Yeah. I love that idea, Fallon, of maybe splitting the difference, one longer nap and one shorter nap on the days she's at home. I think that's a really sensible idea. And also knowing, Sarah, that probably not too far in the distant future, your little 12-month-old is going to drop down to one nap. So you will get it just right for a brief period of time, and then she's going to switch to one longer nap. And this will be a distant memory. So hang in there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Jess has a 15-month-old who transitioned to one nap nearly a month ago. Since then, she's been waking 3 to 3.5 hours after bedtime. Bedtime's around 8 p.m. And she's just needing brief settling with some bum pats. Previously, she would sleep for 6 or more hours before waking. So Jess asks, what could be causing these night wakes and how can they resolve them?
Okay. Probably any of those 3 factors that we talked about at the start of the podcast.
Be working through those.
Yeah, be working through. Is there any motivating factor? Is there a daily rhythm mismatch? Or is there a way that that your 15-month is going to sleep that is causing them to wake up? What we often see is that a wake that happens when you're describing it between 3 and 3.5 hours after falling asleep, that's often when the deep sleep is coming to an end and babies are starting to move into the lighter stages of sleep. So it's not uncommon for issues to arise there if your little one is going to sleep with you in the room, for example, or the TV playing in the background, or something in the environment, which in the first few hours of the night didn't bother them. It was neither here nor there when they cycled or moved through their sleep cycles. But as the sleep pressure gets a little bit lower after that deep sleep is over, then becomes an issue. So I'd probably be just having a think about what is happening at the point that they fall asleep, and is that different at that 3-hour wake up mark, and making any adjustments. And I probably just thinking about how long that one nap is that they're having now. If that could be either shortened or positioned slightly differently in the day. That might also help that overnight wake. So I think there's a few things there for you to work through, Jess, whilst you do some problem solving. The good news is your little one is going back to sleep really quickly with the bum patting, so it should be relatively easy to resolve once you work out what the motivating factor or settling issue is at bedtime.
I think that's really good advice. And how about this one, Laura? We've got Maddie, who has an 11-month-old baby who had frequent split nights until they started Sombelle. Oh, good. After using the quick fade and now supported accelerated approach, settling has improved greatly. However, she still occasionally has 2-hour split nights despite consistent naps and bedtime at 8:30 p.m, wake up at 6:30 a.m. During the split nights, pain relief and bottles don't help. So Maddie asks, should they reduce daytime sleep? They're currently offering 2 hours and 15 minutes. And is there anything else they can do to stop the split nights? She does note that her average sleep need does appear to be reducing according to the sleep diary.
Yes, look, split nights, Maddie, are almost always a sleep pressure issue. Almost always. And you've ruled out that it's not pain or hunger, because when you offer pain relief and when you offer bottles, your little one is not able to go back to sleep. Most of the time they are managing to sleep the whole night through. And your sleep diary is suggesting that their sleep needs have dropped. So I think that looking at adjusting the daily rhythm is going to be the way to resolve these ongoing split nights. You don't necessarily have to reduce the daytime sleep. It might be that you look at bringing wake up time a little bit earlier than 6:30, for example, although I know that 10 hours overnight can feel you don't really want to, most parents don't want to reduce the amount of sleep their child is getting overnight to below 10 hours unless they really have to. So perhaps it is going to be reducing the day sleep would be the better option for you, Maddie. So think about perhaps moving to just an hour and a half, because I suspect their sleep cycles are about 45 minutes long. So it might be an hour and a half daytime sleep, and then you might even be able to add an extra 15 minutes to the nighttime sleep, and see how you go with that, and stick with it for a whole week. So trust your sleep diary, trust what it's showing you. And if the sleep needs have dropped, that's okay. And then adjust the bedtime and wake up accordingly, and reduce that day nap to maybe 2 sleep cycles.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's so important at this age too. We want their nights to be as consolidated as we can get them as they're heading off into toddlerhood. So yeah, that's good advice.
Great. So we have a question from Nicola, who has a 6-week-old baby. So really right at the beginning, a teeny one. And Nicola is trying the quick tapered approach when possible. She says, with 2 older children and a FIFO partner, settling is tricky in the mornings. And she wants to know, is it okay to leave her baby in his cot crying in the hope he goes to sleep, and check in every few minutes for a cuddle or a pat? She says, I can't shush and pat at that time for half an hour because of the 2 other children. And then she finds that she's in a vicious cycle as he then gets overtired and stays awake in her arms while she carries him around with her.
This is a great example of how parents know their babies best. So, Nicola, I would say if you think, you're saying if you're carrying the baby in your arms, they're just kind of looking around and not sleeping, like carrying them to sleep is not an option. And if you feel like they're okay in their cot, then that's a valid option. I would think about it a lot like when we work with not toddlers, twins or triplets or quads. Those babies just have to wait sometimes. We just can't be with all of the babies all of the time. And you know what happens with those babies? They're perfectly fine. They're perfectly fine. So if what you can manage is to have your baby in a safe sleep space whilst you're looking after older children, and those older children are much more likely to come into harm's way if you're turning your back for too long, so your priority's got to be keeping the older ones safe, then that's fine, and just go back in when you can, offer reassurance, and that is a perfectly valid way to manage it. Yeah, and I think that's all you can do. And your baby will probably get used to falling asleep in their cot really, really quickly because they're going to get a lot of practice at it early on. And that can be a really good thing when you've got multiple children as well, is just often it's really important that they can fall asleep in their cot at a relatively young age because you've got so much going on in your life and juggling sports and school and childcare and all of that. Would you add anything, Laura?
No, I think we simply have to be pragmatic in these circumstances. Well, and I so often come back to that when I'm working with families in clinic. We just have to be pragmatic. And you're right, Nicola, it's not possible for you to be doing some patting for half an hour or more in the morning whilst you're on your own with two other children. So cut yourself some slack. Your baby's going to be absolutely fine. You're going back in frequently to support him. That's the best you can do, and your little one is going to be absolutely fine. So hang in there. This is a really, really busy time. I think that all children number 3 or 4 I'm one. I'm child number 3 in my family, where we're all right. In the end, we're all okay. And you've got 3 Fallons, so I'm sure that your youngest one had to just put up with stuff that the other 2 wouldn't have.
But they don't get that level of attention as the firstborn, that's for sure. I think this is a great question from Nicola too, because it underscores the importance of truly just tailoring to the child you've got, the circumstances you've got. Like, people say all sorts of things on the internet, and I often just bang my head against the wall thinking, like, come on, that advice isn't going to work for every parent out there, and parents need permission to look at their situation and go, well, that doesn't work for me, but this option does. And you've got to feel confident that's the right decision for your family and dive in. And it'll be okay. So good luck, Nicola. It sounds like you've definitely got your hands full. But yeah, I think you're on the right track.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Our next question is from Bree, who has a 5-month-old who did have a 12-hour sleep need, which is now trending closer to 11 to 11 and a half hours. Previously, she relied on feeding to sleep or contact naps, but now successfully settles for all naps in the cot and on the go. Well done, Bree. That's brilliant.
Brilliant.
She says that night settling is still via feeding. She catnaps for 30 to 40 minutes in her cot, so ends up having 4 naps a day, totaling between 2.5 to 3 hours, which leaves only 8 hours at night. So bedtime is around 8:30, and she has a 5 to 6 hour stretch, then a feed and another short stretch with a consistent 5 a.m. wake up. So Brie asks, how can she improve overnight sleep with such low sleep needs?
Great question. So if she's sitting on 11 to 11 and a half hours, often it's babies that sit on that amount where we really have to, if we want longer nights, and if you think your baby is ready for this shift, we have to start really stretching them out between those day naps to really try and push more of their sleep into the night. So that's something I would be thinking about. Is they're 5 months old, even on cat naps. A lot of them with low sleep needs are on 3 naps per day at this point. So you could definitely work towards stretching it out to just the 3 naps per day. On the other hand, I mean, we're going through the sort of those factors again in a way, but I would be thinking, overnight settling is still via feeding. So whilst they've got some self-settling ability, they're settling in the cot for naps. By the sounds of it, overnight, they're probably still waking up and kind of going, I was feeding, what's going on? I want another feed. So there could be sort of a bit of motivation happening there as well. So I would keep going with the cot settling and really work on the independence with the cot settling. And I say that because sometimes they master self-settling. And even if sleep pressure is a little low, they're so good at self-settling, they'll do it anyway. So sometimes we see that total sleep duration increase. So we really want to address all of those factors that can influence night wakes, because when they are all addressed, sometimes we do see them getting a little bit more sleep. So I would be, that's where I would be starting, is trying to stretch to the 3 naps and doing a bit of a push with the independent settling. What would you say, Laura? Is there anything I've missed?
No, I think that all sounds like a really good plan. Be brave, Brie, that 3 naps a day is going to be appropriate for your baby. And And, probably in another month, they'll drop down to just the 2 naps a day. Just work on that cot settling. You're doing an awesome job, to have moved away from feeding to sleep and contact naps during the day to having 4 naps in the cot. That's really, really awesome, because often it's nighttime settles that's a bit easier to do in the cot. So Bree, you've managed to do it during the day, so have a lot of courage. That once you probably drop down to the 3 naps during the day, your little one is going to be able to fall asleep in the cot at nighttime without relying on that feed. It's going to be easier than you expect. So let us know how you get on.
Yeah. Well done, Bree. And good luck. I think you've got this. You've absolutely got it. All right. We're running short on time. We've got 3 more to power through. So Lisa has a 20-month-old with a sleep need of around 10.5 to 11 hours. Initially, he had 5 or more wakes a night, but after using the advanced quick fade method, he now falls asleep independently and wakes only 1 or 2 times overnight, resettling with just some shushing. However, recent challenges have emerged. Night waking, so he's waking at 1 to 3 a.m. and taking an hour to resettle. He's resisting his nap, so he's standing up, singing and saying, "No nap." Oh, dear. And then he's hard to wake after an hour when he does take his nap. Lisa wants to know, how can they troubleshoot the recent overnight hysterical wakes after such good progress? Any tips to support consistent cot naps again? And how to make nap wake-ups easier so they don't feel so abrupt or disruptive?
Oh, Lisa, you have made such great progress, and then you've hit a real stumbling block. It sounds like your little one is probably gearing up to drop his nap. Because what we often find is that children that do have sleep needs that are down the lower end of the normal range, they do often drop their naps sooner than children with average or above average sleep needs. So we'll try to hang on to this nap for a little bit longer for you, so that you hopefully get another few months of it. But I would be thinking I'm thinking about your comments, Lisa, about how he's quite hard to wake after an hour when he has the nap. That to me suggests that his sleep that you might be waking him mid-sleep cycle. And so I would be thinking, how long are his sleep cycles? If his sleep cycles are like 45 minutes, you'd be better off just giving him a 45-minute nap. He will wake up feeling much better, rather than giving him that extra 15 minutes, which can feel like it's a nice thing to do, but actually then involves waking a child mid-sleep cycle, and they can then feel really grotty. Someone in clinic the other day called it nap sick, which I hadn't heard before. So they essentially have what's known as sleep inertia, where they're woken mid-cycle. So I would be thinking, let's have a think about how long his sleep cycles are. So have a look in Sombelle to see how you can work that out, and then cap his nap at one of those, however long it is. If it's half an hour, it's half an hour. If it's 45, it's 45. If it's 50, it's 50. Then thinking about adjusting that daily rhythm, is it 10.5 hours rather than 11 hours, his sleep need? And then adjusting bedtime and wake up so that it's in line with what that daily rhythm is. Sometimes at this point, with the nap, when it is just one sleep cycle and we know it's only for another few months, some parents will say they're just going to have to nap in the car on the go or in the pram. Just to get through it. Because this kind of singing and saying no nap, it's a bit hard to argue against that. Yeah. So it may be that the naps need to be on the go. But either way, shortening that nap to one sleep cycle is also going to help with the overnight wakes, because we should find that with that daily rhythm in line with, if it's 10.5 hours, it's in line with that sleep need, he's less likely to be waking up for an hour at a time in the night. Do you have anything to add, Fallon? I feel like I went around the houses there.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think
Okay.
adjusting that nap will make a difference. Just surrendering to naps on the go can just take a bit of weight off the mind as well. And I agree. I reckon you've got maybe a couple of months left and that nap will be gone. But sometimes that's not a bad thing. It means you get a longer night, and
Yeah.
that might work really well. So good luck, Lisa.
Amelia's written in, she's just started using Sombelle and has created a sleep diary for her 10-month-old, but she is unsure about how best to record naps when the duration varies so much depending on the environment. Oh, this is a common question, Fallon, isn't it? For example, a cot nap is usually one sleep cycle, about 40 minutes, whilst contact naps or car naps can be up to an hour and a half. Pram naps fall somewhere in between. Since they live rurally, some naps each week are inevitably in the car. So Amelia's question is, should they try to track naps during a week when more are in the cot, or just go with the usual routine and record the mix of nap types and durations? And she has a second question, which is, do we have any tips for helping dad do bedtime? Their baby is bottle fed but refuses to take a bottle from dad and becomes inconsolable when dad handles bedtime, even when mum stays out of sight from the start of bath time.
Oh, that's tricky. Well,
Yeah.
let's start with the first part of that question, which is when you keep a sleep diary, your only thing you need to do is live your life. Just live your life, do whatever you would normally do on that particular type of day, and just track when they sleep. It's as simple as that, because your baby is already used to sometimes having a short cot nap, sometimes having a car nap, and we just want to get a reading on their circadian rhythm for what is typical for them. So go about your normal life and just track sleep when they sleep, and that's it. It's that simple. And I actually did update the directions in Sombelle because we do get a few questions about this. And I updated those steps for keeping the sleep diary the other day. So it's detailed in there as well. So in terms of tips for helping dad do the bedtime, so many babies just they have a preference for one parent and then a few months later it switches to another parent. Look, I would say it's just going to take practice. We just have to practice and practice and practice. And eventually babies will realize, okay, it's the same bottle, whether I get it from mum or from dad or from another caregiver. It might be that you choose, if there's a particular time of day when your baby's a bit more likely to take their bottle from their dad, maybe you keep practicing at that time, even leave the house so your baby knows you're not around to do the bottle. When that's getting a bit easier, then start to introduce more practice at bedtime as well. And I think that's just it. It's challenging, but you'll get through it. But you've just got to show your baby that it doesn't matter who gives you this bottle. It's the same old bottle either way.
Yeah, I think that's a really lovely idea, Fallon, to, maybe it's the morning bottle where lots of babies are really hungry in the morning and they are more likely to take the bottle from whoever gives it to them because they're just hungry. And so asking dad to do the bottle at that time, letting the baby get more experienced at taking the bottle from dad, and then saying, okay, now let's give it a go at bedtime.
Yep, good plan. And lucky last question is from Michaela. She'd like to know how to tell if a toddler is ready to stop their day naps altogether. Will they go back and forth between day napping and not for a time before dropping them altogether? Will they sleep longer at night once the day nap is dropped? And how do you know if you're pushing them too fast to drop the day nap?
So we have a lesson on signs to look out for that a child is ready to drop a nap in all of the programs. When it comes to toddlers dropping their nap altogether, we'll often see toddlers really resisting their nap. So a bit like one of the members' questions earlier, where the toddler's singing and saying no nap, they're really not interested at all in lying down for their nap and sometimes therefore skipping it. Or if they do have it, then taking a long time for them to fall asleep that night. So I'd be looking at the other signs in the section on signs to drop a nap and seeing if your toddler is showing those consistently. We want to make sure that they've been present for at least a week before you then say, yep, now we're going to drop the nap. For some toddlers, they do have a period of time where they might have some days where they have one sleep cycle, for for a nap and other days not. That tends to make the transition a little bit more wobbly, and it goes on for a bit longer. But if that suits you, like if you are needing to be in the car, for example, on some days of the week, and so your toddler just has a nap on those days, then move bedtime a bit later on those days. If you can, try to drop the nap cold turkey, but you can give your child a little power nap in the later afternoon to get them through until bedtime if you have to. At the time that normally would be having a nap, think about having some quiet time with them instead, some rest time where perhaps you just read books together or play a low energy game or watch something on TV just to get them through. Whether the sleep gets added into the nighttime sleep, so the daytime sleep, whether that gets added into the nighttime sleep will depend on what their current sleep needs are. So sometimes, yes, if their sleep needs haven't changed, their daytime nap will move into the nighttime sleep, and bedtime often then comes earlier. If you're in a situation where dropping the nap has coincided with a drop in their sleep needs, sometimes that nap duration just goes off into the ether. Poof, it's gone. And bedtime and wake up stay the same as they were whilst the child was still having a nap. So it will depend on your toddler. I always do fingers crossed, hope for the best. You can bring bedtime earlier initially and let's see how you go. And it may be that for a period of time as they're getting used to not having a nap at all, bedtime is a bit earlier. They manage to maintain their sleep until morning. And then after a week or two, sometimes 3, where they've got used to it, as in they've got used to not having a nap during the day, bedtime can start to move a little bit later, and wake up stays the same. So good luck, Michaela. Let us know how you get on.
Absolutely. Thank you to all the parents for submitting such brilliant questions. And I really hope everyone's picked up a few tips or a few factors they can think about if they're worrying about night wakes in their baby or toddler. And don't forget, our night waking masterclass is coming very soon to Sombelle. So if you are in the trenches right now, thinking I really need some support with this, it's probably perfect timing actually with the last days of our end of financial year sale. It's a great chance to get 30% off joining, and you'll know that those masterclasses will be available really quite soon. So if you're keen on that support, check out the link in the show notes to learn more about Sombelle. We also run some pretty fantastic sleep clinics as well, where we see families from all over the place via telehealth. We also have our face-to-face clinic in Melbourne too. So if you just want to work one-on-one with someone, we can absolutely support you as well. And lastly, if you would like to buy us a coffee, please do so. There's a link in the show notes. We did have somebody lovely buy us a coffee the other day, and I forgot to put it on our notes. So
it was Sarah.
Maybe next week.
Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That's so lovely. All right. So all those tired parents out there, have hope. It does get better. It does get easier. And if you need support, we're here for that. So do reach out if you need us. Otherwise, you'll hear from us. Well, not next week, actually. We're going to take a week off for school holidays and all the ups and downs that brings to our schedules. So we will take a bit of a break, but you'll hear from us again very soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.